In this tutorial, we'll be showing you how to develop proper vectors needed to create a relief banner. We'll be using mostly the Polyline tool and demonstrating the powerful node editing tools that you have available to you in our software. Ultimately, the vectors that we're going to create will be used to model a banner using the two-rail sweep function in Aspire in a separate tutorial video. Okay, to get started, we're going to want to create a brand new file. This is going to be a single-sided job. The width will be 18 inches, the height will be 6 inches, and the thickness will be 0.75 inches. And of course, our units will be inches. We're going to be zeroing off our material surface, and our datum is going to be set to the center. We can just click OK. Before we get started, we're going to take a look at our snapping options. Currently, right now, we have geometry snapping is turned on, and smart snapping is turned off. We're going to leave smart snapping turned off. That way we're going to take advantage of just the geometry snapping. With the smart snapping turned on, you're going to have all kinds of different options that aren't really going to be needed for this very organic shape. But we do want to take advantage of the options that geometry snapping gives us, like snapping to object centers, endpoints, and things like that. Now, before we get too far into this, let's go ahead and take a look at some of our options. We're going to go up to Edit and down to the Snap options, or we could press F4 on our keyboard if we would like to. Now down here under our snapping radius, currently right now, if we hover over top of the sliding handle and we click, you'll see it set to 10. We're going to turn it all the way down to 4. That way our snapping will be a bit more accurate for this job. And then we can just go ahead and click OK. Okay, to get started, we're going to need to draw some lines. So we're going to do that using our Draw a Polyline tool. So we're going to click that. We're not going to use any of the options in this dialog right now. We're going to go directly to our 2D view and start drawing right in it. Now, because we happen to have our toggle geometry snapping turned on, then we can click to the center of our job without any problem at all. So we're going to drop a node there using our left mouse button. And then I'm going to go ahead and drop another one here. But instead of letting go of my left mouse button, I'm actually going to drag it. And you'll see how I go straight away into drawing a nice smooth curve. And once I'm happy with that shape, I can go ahead and let go of that and move on to my next nice smooth curve. This is a great way to draw some nice organic shapes, or when you get really good at it, it's really nice to be able to go ahead and use to trace a bitmap with. Now, if you decide that you don't want this to be a smooth curve anymore, you can go ahead and just press S on your keyboard and it'll go back to a straight line. And you can start dropping in new straight lines. Again, holding down that left mouse button when you drop a point down or a node down, then you can go ahead and turn that straight into a curve. Now, if you don't like that, you can let go and use your backspace button on your keyboard to undo those steps. Now for this particular job, I'm going to go ahead and just draw some nice straight line segments to get me started. So we're going to go ahead and drop a node somewhere around here, and somewhere over here, and somewhere down here, and maybe up here somewhere. Now this is not going to be too obvious what I'm actually creating here in the end, but when I'm all done, you're totally going to understand what it is. So we'll drop that last node and press Escape on my keyboard to jump out of the Polyline tool. Now I'm going to go straight into my node mode, which I can access that by pressing N on my keyboard with a vector selected. So that's N on my keyboard. Now I've got lots of different things I can do here. I can hover over top of the line segment and press my right mouse button. I'm going to get this great little pop-up here that's going to give me the quick keys for some options. I can convert this line segment into a Bezier, into an arc. I can insert a point where I had right-clicked. I can cut a vector. I can delete that span. I can insert a midpoint, and so on. But what I like to do here is actually go ahead and reselect that vector and select all of these nodes by using my box selection. That's holding down my left mouse button and dragging, and then pressing S on the keyboard. You'll see what I get. Now I could have easily have gotten this by dropping and leading my left mouse button down like I showed you earlier and turning each of those straight lines into curves as I went, but I find this a little bit easier to kind of manage in my head. So for now, what I'm going to do is just kind of grab these control handles and kind of give me the shape that I'm looking for. So the shape that I'm looking for is if you're looking straight down on a banner, would be what the edge of all the curls look like. Okay, now that might not make a whole lot of sense to you right now, but it will in the end. So I'm just kind of shaping these a little bit. This is a very subjective thing. It all depends on what kind of shape you're looking for. For me, I just want a nice, smooth shape that everything looks good. There aren't too many bits that look kind of flat. That looks all right. Kind of happy with this. You can see I'm just grabbing those nodes or those control handles. If I don't like what I did, I can just go Control Z and I can move that back to where it belongs. Then I can go ahead and just keep sort of moving this into the shape that I'd like it to be so that I get a nice looking ribbon or banner in the end. Now the last part for right now that I kind of want to focus on is going to be this top section right here. You'll see how it dips down below the center line here. Well, I don't want that to happen. I want it to be nice and straight and then taper off from that down around this curve. Well, to do that is I can simply just kind of drag this handle up and snap it to the center line. But the problem with that is you'll see that I'm actually raising up above the center line here, which isn't great. That's because of where this control handle is for the next curve. So I just zoom in, I just drag that down. So it's below, just slightly below the center line. Then I can go ahead and make the change that I need. I want to make sure that I just transition into these curves nice and smoothly so that in the end it's going to look okay. Now if I'd like to, if I just want to actually take this curve and move it from the center down, I can just click on it and drag it straight down. And that'll help out with some of these shapes here at the end that might look a little bit funny. Now I think I'm pretty happy with that in the end. I think that looks really good. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click here into the white space so I can have a look at what that line looks like without my nodes in the way or my control handles. I'm really not super happy with the way this kind of is shaped right here. So I'm going to go ahead and reselect that node or that line again and adjust these nodes appropriately till I get the shape that I'd like. This might take a little fussing around until you get it right, but there we have it. Great, I think that's really good. So I'm going to go ahead now and go back to my selection mode. Before we move on, I did notice when I zoomed in here a little bit that there is a bit of a bump here in this line. So I think that's because I had adjusted a node here and it made this rise up a little bit. So let's select that line again, press N on the keyboard, and you can see where my control handle actually did pop up a little bit. And I can drag that back down again. And now it's going to come up and be nice and flat at the top, which is exactly what I want. That looks much better now. Let's now move this line up a bit so that we can make a copy of it just below it, so we can get a really good sense of what this banner is going to look like when it's all done. So let's go back to our pick tool and we're going to select this. And then we are going to use our move selected objects. And we are going to make sure that we move this we're going to make sure that we use our relative position to move this up on its y-axis by 2 inches. So that's going to move it up our screen 2 inches. And I can go ahead and click apply. We're going to close this down. Now I want to make a copy of this. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. I'm going to grab it here on its end, and I'm going to hold down my control key and I'm going to drag it down. So holding down my control key will make a copy of this. And because I grabbed somewhere near the end of that line, I can actually snap it to the center of my job and then let go. Now to get a sense of what this is going to look like, we're going to draw in some quick vertical lines here to have a look. So let's go back over to our Draw Polyline tool, and we're going to draw a line from here to there. Okay, and then we can press the spacebar to create a new line. Draw one from here to here. These don't need to be super accurate. These are here just only for reference. Press the spacebar again. Go from here down to here. Press the spacebar again. And go from here down to here. and we'll press the spacebar again to finish that off, and then we can press escape. So you can see now that this area here will be the top of our ribbon. That'll it'll look like it's turning under itself and turning around and then back up onto itself again. And that looks pretty good, I think. Now is our opportunity to make this look a little bit more organic. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and hold down my Shift key and select these lines. Then also select this one. And if I go into node mode, I'll get access to all of the nodes of those combined line segments. And now I can go ahead and make some really quick tweaks here to this to make everything a little bit more organic looking in the end. I want to do that, and maybe we can grab these ones here and kind of move them over a little bit like that. So it kind of tapers the bottom of this a bit. Looks all right. Maybe we can drag these over just a little bit to give it more of a tapered look in the end. I think that looks pretty nice, just like that. And it's kind of coming together here and spreading out a bit at the bottom, which I think is kind of nice. And that looks really good. So we can go ahead now and click in the white space for a second and have a look at that and see if that's what we'd like to see. So you can see this line kind of travels around here, and that's going to make the top piece look really good. There's lots here going on. I might select this and just, again, maybe pull this up just a little bit, just so it bottoms out a little nicer. That looks okay. Perfect. I think that looks really great. So now what we're going to need is to actually cut these two long lines that we made into the parts that we need to create some cookie cutters that we're going to use to cut out some areas of shapes that we're going to create using our two-rail sweep when we go to create the 3D model of this. So to do that, we're just going to kind of note in our head where these lines kind of connect, and we're going to go ahead and choose this, and I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to cut that where it kind of intersects. Okay, so actually we're going to bring this over there. Sometimes it's easier just to line these up like that. So I can reselect this and I can zoom in, and I'm going to cut that right there. So pressing C on my keyboard, it will cut it right there. Same here, I can grab this and I can, so I selected this shape and I can cut it right there. Okay, so now I have a little tiny segment here. That's great. I'm going to do the same down here, except for I'm actually going to grab this and pull it out a little bit. So you'll see that it kind of stops at the point where it starts to tuck under itself. I'll reselect this line and I'm going to cut it right there with C again on my keyboard. We're going to do the same here. We'll grab this vector there. That's this line that's right here. Sometimes when you zoom in, it's hard to tell what you're doing. So I'm just going to grab it and put it there. Zoom in, and if I forget how to actually cut, I can select that vector and right click on that where I want to cut it, and I can choose cut vector. That's where I want it to be. That's fine. This one here, you'll see how that line wasn't perfect. It was just there, like I had said, just for reference. I think that'll be a better spot to cut it. So let's select that vector and we're going to press C again. And we're going to do the same here. And using the scroll wheel on your mouse, you can zoom in and out really quickly. And we're going to cut that right there. And there we have it. Now we're going to go back to our selection mode, and we're going to delete out these temporary vectors that we put there, because we're going to create some proper vectors to connect the parts that we need. So holding down my Shift key, I'm going to grab this top span and this bottom one here. And I can go over here and I can say join or close the vectors with a straight line. And you'll see that it closed the other end, and that's fine. So we're going to go ahead now and do it again, and it will close this end for us, which is perfect. Now we're going to go ahead and select this segment and this segment here, and we're going to do the same again. And you'll see what happens, that it ends up going ahead and connecting the closest two endpoints. And we don't want it to do that, so we can press Control Z. And the other way to do that is to manually do it. So go back to our Draw a Polyline tool, and we are going to draw a line from here to there. Press Escape on the keyboard. And then we're going to go ahead and select those three line segments. So we're going to select this one, hold down my Shift key, grab this one and that one. And the easiest way to do this is to use our join open vectors. So when I click that, we'll see some options here or some information. We'll see that we have 3 open vectors selected. We have a tolerance set up for the actual connection of those vectors, how close they need to be before they'll actually connect them together. But then we'll see after joining, we're going to end up with 2 open vectors, which is not what I want. I actually only want to have 1. So I must have one of my ends that's not as close as I need it to be and doesn't fit with inside of this tolerance. So let's close this down and let's zoom in and have a peek. And if I take a look here, you'll see that right here is my problem. So let's grab this vector here, go into node mode, and we're going to move this point down, and then we're going to connect it to the end of that other line. And you'll see right there, the cursor has changed to a little crosshair. I can let go there, and now it's right on the money. So let's go back again and press escape, and we're going to hold down our shift key and reselect those vectors and go ahead and join those, and you'll see that now we have only 1 open vector after we go ahead and close all 3 of those. Join that up, close that down, select that, and you'll see what I have. Now I can go ahead and I can close that with a straight line, and I have that piece that I need. The next one I need to do is to select these 2 here. We're going to join those with a straight line and a straight line again. And now we have this piece at the bottom. So now we're going to go ahead and select these 2 at the end. And we're going to do the same. We're going to join it. And you'll see we have the same problem we had before, where it's joining the closest 2 endpoints, which is not what we want. So let's Control Z. And now we can go ahead and manually do that by, again, dropping in a vector. Press escape on my keyboard, hold down my shift key, and grab those 3 vectors. Join those together, make sure everything works out here. We've got 3 open vectors, our tolerance is proper, and we're going to end up with 1 open vector. And we can join that, close that down, reselect that. Let's join that with a straight line. And now we have all the parts that we need to create our ribbon. Now, what we do want to do is, in the end, this piece right here, because we're going to end up mirroring these, the end result, the end components that we end up cookie cutting out, we're going to make sure that we actually go into node mode, and we're going to move these just slightly over that center line. Okay, and that way when I merge it together, it's going to merge in nice and tight like it should. Okay, let's zoom in, press F on our keyboard to look at everything all at once. Go back to our pick tool, click into the white space, and we'll see what we have. You know, the last little thing we're going to change here, just because it's going to make it a little bit nicer, is we're going to modify this line right here. So we're going to select that, and we're going to go into node mode again. I'm just going to hover somewhere around here. I'm going to press I on my keyboard. So if I right click, you'll see I means insert a point. But for now, I'm just going to press I on my keyboard. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to turn this to a Bezier, and I'm just going to slightly modify the shape of this so it kind of has an interesting sort of end ribbon to it. And I can grab this and use my cursor keys to scoot it in. I'm going to press B on my keyboard again on top of this one, and we're just going to give it a bit of an interesting shape to the end that looks more like that. If I press escape on my keyboard, yeah, that looks more like I'd like the end of it to look. So that looks pretty nice. I'll press F again to zoom out to my job limits. That looks good. Now, for our next step, we need to start to create the cross sections that we are going to use in our 2-rail sweep to create the shapes that we're going to use these vectors to crop or cookie cut away the bits we don't want. So first of all, we need to make sure that these are all closed vectors. So if we go ahead and select these, you'll see this is a closed shape, this is a closed shape, this is a closed shape, and this one here is a closed shape as well. So we have all of that covered, and that's great. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to construct the cross sections of our ribbon down here on the bottom of our job space. Now, the way I look at this is if you took the ribbon looking straight down on it and you cut right across here, and then turn it up on its y-axis and look down the model, you're actually drawing those cross sections that you see there. Okay, now again, this might not be very clear right now, but once we get it all done and you see us actually create these profiles, then it should all make sense. So to start out with, I am going to draw a box down here, and this box is going to be about 5 inches tall and about, let me see, about this long. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to match the length of this in here somewheres. And this is the actual maximum height that I want the thickness of my ribbon to be while I'm modeling it. Okay, we can change it obviously later by scaling up our shape height once we're all done. But for right now, we're going to use this as a reference. So we'll close this down and we'll just click in the white space. Now, my next tip for you is to actually pull down a guideline from your ruler up top. That's clicking on the ruler up top and holding down your left mouse button and dragging it down. And it will snap to our object here because we still have turned on our geometry snapping. And we're going to pretend that this guideline is actually the modeling plane or the zero plane of our 3D space, okay? And then also I'm going to drag down a second one and I'm going to click it to the top or snap it to the top of this rectangle. And that's going to be our maximum limit that any of our vectors for these cross sections need to be or should be, and they can't poke above this, okay? And that's important, and you'll see that in a minute. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use this rectangle to actually create this cross section, the cross section that we're going to extrude to create this piece of our ribbon. Okay, and you'll see it right there. So let's select that. Let's go into node mode by pressing N on the keyboard. Let's hover over this line and right click and say delete the span. Then we're going to right click on this line and we're going to create that to a Bezier. And we can grab this node and we're just going to use our cursor keys and slowly nudge that down. Now you'll see that we're getting sort of the shape that we would need if we actually cut this across the middle and looked up from the edge. This is the kind of shape that we might want to see. Now I do want to make this a little bit more of a curve, so I'm going to use my cursor keys and slide that over a bit that way. Might grab this fellow there and bring him over. I'll zoom in a little bit and bring this down. And I like to, when I'm building ribbons, make sure that these come around nice and tight like that. And that looks really good. Now you'll see that this handle is not above that guideline, and this one is snapped to the guideline, just like earlier in the demonstration when I was drawing a couple of the other lines. I wanted to make sure that they were nice and flat on the top, so that was kind of my criteria for that. So I'm pretty happy with that. So the next thing we're going to do is press escape on the keyboard, and we'll reselect this vector, and we're going to copy it to create this next part right here, which is the cross section we're going to use to create this piece of our ribbon. Right here, this piece right there. Okay, so to do that, we're going to select that. I'm going to hold down I'm going to click it twice. I'm going to hold down my control key and drag this middle transform handle into right about here somewheres. So it's matching up with the edge of this right here. Okay, the edge of that fold. That way I can better visualize what I'm going to do. Now I can go into node mode. And I can go ahead and change the shape of this. So this kind of needs to be swoop down and back up again and then around. So let's just take this node right there and let's just turn it around like so. That looks pretty good. Except for, you'll see here that we're above that guideline, or on that guideline, we're above this cross section. Now if we chose to use this cross section right now to create this part, then the piece that's above this other vector here would actually poke up through the top of our ribbon. So we don't want that. So we're going to zoom in a bit and grab those vectors or those nodes and just go down like so with our cursor keys. Then we can grab that control handle and pull it around so it looks a little bit more like that. Maybe like this. And you'll see what's going on here. We have a nice dip. Comes back up around again, and then it doesn't rise up above here, but there's a nice little division of height here. So when we create our models, there's going to be a nice little step there. So when your tool comes across that, when it cuts it, it'll actually leave a little bit of a drop there. So I feel that's pretty nice. Maybe we can drop this down just a little bit. Gives a little bit more of a curve there, and I think that's pretty good. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the same cross section here to create the profile that we're going to need for this part right here. So press escape, select that. This time we're going to hold down our control key with that selected. We're going to grab this middle handle. So again, control is going to make a copy of this. And we're going to pull this out so it lines up with about there. That's pretty good. Back into node mode again, and we're going to modify this cross section to match what we think we need. So again, it's going to look something similar to that and something like this. Now again, we do not need this to dip down below this guideline. If it does, what we're going to end up having is we're actually going to model below our zero plane, and things aren't going to look quite exactly like what we want. So we can now just fiddle around a little bit with these cross sections or these nodes. And same here, I'm going to grab you and I'm going to make sure this transition kind of flows nicely around there. I think that looks pretty good right there. Okay, so for our next one, we're going to go back to our selection tool. So we're going to press escape. We're going to select that one. Click it again to take it into transform mode. Hold down our shift key and we're going to, or our control key, I apologize, and we're going to drag it across there. And again, we're trying to match up with this right here. Go into node mode, and then we're going to pull these handles around so we get the shape that we'd like to see for that piece right there. Now this is all very subjective and depending on how you want your ribbon to look. So you might want this to kind of dip down a little bit right there. Maybe we want to select this and actually bring this down a little and then grab all of these guys. Connect them there. That might in the end look a little bit better. So let's just have a quick look at what we have here right now. Let's go back to our selection tool. So we have a group of closed vectors that we're going to be using to crop the components that we create with our 2-rail sweep using these cross sections. Now, in order to do that, what we need to have is some drive rails. Now, one thing that it's important to note here is that all of these cross sections all touch the modeling plane. They all have legs on the end, so they come from the same point. If you forget to put these legs on the end, then what will happen is it'll actually tilt down, so this node actually touches the modeling plane and it will look a little funny, not what you expect. So be sure that you have these legs or they're fully drawn vectors from the bottom all the way over and back to the bottom again. Okay? So now let's just go ahead and draw some vectors for our drive rail. So we're going to use our draw polyline tool and we're simply going to go ahead and drop a line here and drop it down here. Now, what I want to be sure of is that this line that I create encompasses the majority of or all of this closed vector that I'm going to use to crop the component that I'm going to create using the 2-rail sweep in this cross section. And that looks pretty good. So if I press escape, that's okay. And remember back when we drew this, I actually extended this shape out a little bit. Well, make sure that you pull out that vector just so it lines up nicely on top of there and snaps on there. There we go. Okay, so it's overshooting that just a little bit. That way that component that we create when we mirror it across, it will merge in nicely like it should. Next line we're going to draw is going to be through here. So we're just going to drop a node there and draw our line to there. And again, like I did over here, we are going to make sure that this is positioned properly and as close as we can to this, but maybe a little bit to the left. And that's what it is right now when you zoom all the way in. So that's a pretty good line there. We're going to draw another line right down here. And you might need to go press escape, go into node mode on that and just kind of tweak the line a little bit so that it doesn't cross into your shape. Then we can move it to where it belongs. Looks good right there. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and draw another one here. Escape, go into node mode, and we're just going to nudge that out to where it belongs. Just scoot around here and Make sure that there's a bit of a space there. There is. Now what I do want to do is I do want to go ahead and extend this line out a little bit, because we're going to use it not only to create this shape here, but we're also going to use it to create this shape down here. So let's just bring this out so that it ends up matching out here somewhere with the other one, the other vector there. And if you're not quite sure whether they line up or not, then just go ahead and go back to your selection mode and drag out a guideline. And just make sure that they miss the bottom of this, because if we end up extruding so that we don't get our full shape in there, we're going to crop it off prematurely, and we don't want that. So you'll see that that's not quite long enough. So let's use this guideline and drag it down. Go into our node mode again, and we can pull this out so that it's proper length for what we need. So we don't want this guideline anymore. We can hover over it, right click, and we can say delete guideline, and we don't need that anymore. Then we want to do this one as well. So let's just go ahead and pull that down through there. Press escape, go into node mode again. Just nudge these guys over. So again, they encompass the shape that we want, so that when we extrude this cross section along those two drive rails, we'll have enough material so when we crop out that closed vector, we're going to have the shape that we want. Let's just press F on our keyboard, press escape, go back to selection mode, and that looks pretty good. I'm happy with all that. So now let's go ahead and save this off. So we'll go up to File, we're going to save as, and we'll put that right into the tutorials folder, and we can click save. Now that we have that all ready to go, we can move on to our next video. We're going to take all of these lines and create the components that we need to create this ribbon.